The Telecaster is an iconic guitar that has so many signature sounds, it's crazy. Think about these Tele players and the differences in their sound. James Burton and Jimmy Page, Steve Cropper and Jeff Beck, Bruce Springsteen and Andy Summers, Vince Gill and Tom Morello, Mike Bloomfield and Albert Collins, all Telecaster players with their own unique sound. The Telecaster seems to be a one-horse pony guitar that has a singular, very identifiable sound, but it continues to surprise me when I hear a new guitar sound I don't recognize, and then I find out it's a Telecaster. To me, the classic Tele sound was always the great, bright, hollow twang that I always seem to associate with country music. When I started playing guitar back in the day, I had no desire to get a Tele. I always wanted a Strat. The Tele to me was thin and twangy and not the sound that I was going for. But now, a few years down the road, I've come to appreciate the Tele sound. The classic Tele may not be as powerful and as streamlined as a Strat, but it commands respect from some of the greatest guitar players in the world. Why? It's simplicity. I believe it's because the Telecaster, like no other guitar, is a basic, no-frills, meat-and-potatoes guitar. A solid chunk of wood with 2 pickups and 6 strings. Nothing fancy. It's a working man's guitar. When you sling a Tele over your shoulder, it's almost like, I don't need a fancy guitar to make great music. Just hand me that beat-up hunk of wood over there with the strings on it, and I'll light it up and make it scream. There's a pride in not having the most fancy equipment and killing it with an amazing sound. The Telecaster is like rugby football. We don't need stinking pads or helmets, just raw muscle. Let's see who shows up to play and who's still standing at the end of the game. Or the guy who shows up to the street drag race with his beat-up, souped-up backyard junker car and blows the doors off the rich kid's Corvette. The Telecaster used to be the cheapest guitar in the Fender catalog, so a lot of players started out on a Tele because it was the most affordable. It's amazing how every player adopts the Tele and creates their own unique sound. It seems like it's not a versatile guitar, yet it's got thousands of voices. Okay, here we go. The Fender Squier Classic Vibe 50's Telecaster. This is a $399 Telecaster, currently made in China, with a pine body and a maple neck, and comes finished in either butterscotch or white. It has a single-ply vintage-style 5-hole black pickguard, and comes with Fender-designed Alnico 5 single-coil pickups. It has a C-shaped neck with a 9.5-inch radius fingerboard, narrow tall frets, and finished in a vintage tint gloss. It has a vintage-style Telecaster bridge with barrel saddles and string-through body design, along with nickel-plated hardware. Just as a side note, my guitar was made in China, and it's the most current model. But previous to early 2020, the Classic Vibe Tele was made in Indonesia, and there are some differences. The quality is equally as good on both, but the made in Indonesia version has an 8-hole pickguard and comes with brass saddles. I would say the only thing that's not as vintage is the bridge. It does not come with brass barrel saddles and does not have the vintage style Pat Penn engraved stamp on it. Other than that, they pretty much nailed the vintage look. The bridge saddles are the only thing I replaced on my Tele. I believe there's a difference in the string tone with brass saddles, and mostly I just like the way they look. If you're new to the Tele and you're thinking, only 3 bridge saddles? How in the world am I going to get the intonation correct? Well, you're right. The bridge will not allow you to adjust every string individually like a Gibson Tune-o-matic or a Strat. But I found despite the limitations of the 3-saddle bridge, it works fine. And if it bothers you, there are lots of third-party replacement bridge options. In fact, the Tele can be customized any way you like it with thousands of options. A lot of people buy a Squier because it's an inexpensive base to build up their own custom Tele exactly the way they want. But for me, I'm an old school guy, and I want a Tele to be as vintage stock as possible. The Squier Classic Vibe 50's Tele is just that. It's designed to be very close to the original 50's Telecaster. The original Leo Fender prototype Teles were made of pine. Pine is not a hardwood like maple and mahogany. Pine is classified as a softwood, and it's lighter and less dense. The body on the Classic Vibe Tele has a nice wood grain, and it's visible through the translucent finish on both the butterscotch and the white finishes. The finish is polyurethane, but with a pine body, I like that because the poly, I think, is a little harder and more durable and should do a better job at protecting the somewhat softer pine. I have to say I love the slightly darker vintage tint on the maple neck. They did a good job of getting the vintage look without it just looking like a bad spray tan. I'm still waiting for some of my older Fender maple necks to darken from age, but I can tell you it takes a really long time. The Squier Classic Vibe 50's Tele has a 1.65-inch bone nut and 21 narrow tall frets. The nut was cut correctly and the setup was good right out of the box. It comes from the factory with 9-gauge strings. There were no high frets. The fret edges were smooth with no roughness or snags up and down the neck. The action was set pretty much the way I like it. I think I adjusted it maybe a little bit. The tuners work well, but I did notice that the first string tuner, which is the high E, was slightly harder to turn. I'm sure this will loosen up with time. The neck plate on the back is engraved with the Squier logo and looks nice. The string-through barrels on the back of the guitar are flush to the surface and again finish very nicely. The bridge is a vintage-style bridge, but it does not have the Pat Pen, short for patent pending, stamped into it, like the American Tele or the original Tele. The strings go through the bridge and through the body, which is true to the original design. The original bridge saddles are chrome and slightly smaller than the replacement brass barrels I purchased. If you're interested in replacing the bridge saddles, I'll put a link in the description below. A case is not included, but the shipping box is a study on how to make cardboard as strong and protective as possible. It cradled the guitar, and even after traveling across the world, there was absolutely no problems. The pickups are probably a little hotter than the true vintage originals. They have the classic Tele sound and can give you that bright, clear twang, or snarl and get dirty with some gain. The body and the neck pickup position is routed out large enough to install any type of pickup you want. You can put a humbucker, a P90, or a mini humbucker in there without a problem. All the body cutouts are covered really well with shielding paint, and the pick guard is fully covered on the back with foil. If you've never had a Telecaster before, just be aware that the neck pickup is not as bright and does not have the output of a Stratocaster neck pickup. It was designed by Leo Fender for guitars to emulate the bass tone before there were electric bass guitars. Some people think the neck pickup is too weak and the sound is dull, but my favorite Tele sound is both pickups and the balance between the super bright bridge pickup and the warmer sounding neck pickup. The fact that the pickups are so completely different is what makes the combination sound unique. It would be fun to try different pickups, but the stock pickups sound great and there's really no need to change them out. Here's some sound samples of the pickups. Some people have voiced complaints that the electronic components in the Squier are subpar. I've got no problem with the electronics. The switch is solid, and the volume and tone controls have a nice taper and work smoothly. The only problem I had was the 1/4-inch input jack on mine was loose and needed tightening. So this Tele is not my first guitar. For some people, it might even be one of the last guitars they buy. Because, let's face it, the Tele is not a glamorous guitar. It's not a guitar that I dreamed about. I actually was looking for a guitar to use as a Nashville guitar. A Nashville guitar is the term for stringing a guitar with the low E, A, D, and G with light gauge strings and tuning it up an octave like the octave strings on a 12-string guitar. When you double track a Nashville guitar with a normal tuned guitar, you get the sound of a 12-string. This is a recording technique first recognized in Nashville and used on lots of tracks that you'd think would be a Rickenbacker 12-string. So I bought the Squier Classic Vibe Tele to use as a Nashville guitar, but I instantly fell in love with the feel and the vibe of the instrument. I'm a songwriter, and usually a new instrument will inspire me, but this Tele does a lot more. It's a freaking music-making machine. I have no idea why this happens, but I can tell you that every time I pick up this guitar, a new song comes out. There's no logic, there's no explanation. It's crazy. But for sure, it's fun to play, and it gets me inspired every time I pick it up. So there it is. The Squier Classic Vibe 50's Telecaster is the classic sleeper, the underdog story. The little guy who shows up at a fight with a baseball bat and defeats the big guy who's armed to the teeth. There's nothing more satisfying. So you can have your fancy PRS private stocks and VOS Les Pauls, and I'll stand on the same stage with my lowly Tele and spank you silly and send you whimpering back to your mama. Even worse, I'll do it with a $400 made-in-wherever Squier Classic Vibe Tele that'll stand toe-to-toe with your expensive custom shop guitar and leave you reeling before you can say Roy Buchanan. So that's what I love about my Squier Tele. Thanks everyone for watching, and thanks for all the positive comments. It means a lot to me and I appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button.